and this is GamerKulture. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today is Tuesday, February 28th, the very last day of February, the month of love, 2017. GamerKulture is the drive, passion, and dedication to all things in gaming by the Grand Geek Gathering Network. The ever-changing world of GamerKulture involves communities of all types, the evolving industry that surrounds us, and the people who use it for the betterment of all. Now, on to Character Select, and we're not going to do a Question of the Week, because Question of the Week is going to be a little game. So, on to my very special lady guests. As always, introduce yourselves, my friends. It's great. It's great. Well done.
I'm S. Bookworm, also now known as Bookworm, because no one knew that was my full title.
Did not know that.
It is.
Never bothered to look.
Who is this? Who is this intruder?
That's
I don't know. Bookworm.
That's John Wayne.
I know an S book, but not Bookworm.
But yeah, S Bookworm is short form for S. I mean, S Book is short form for S Bookworm because PSN, which is what I normally play on, would not let me use S Bookworm for some reason. So it got
I'm
short.
sorry, someone already came up with the name S Bookworm. It's like, I think I'm gonna have to fight them.
Oh, they should have that. If someone steals your name, just meet me in the pit.
You get to fight over a name. I like it. All right, the other lady. Who are you? How'd you get here?
Squeaky Bear Gamer. How did I get here? I have no idea. I guess I started this, so I brought y'all here. Thank you very much.
You did, in fact, start the call.
It's true.
We were working on Minecraft.
Yeah, that was probably the first, 45 minutes of this Skype call, was figuring out how to set up a Minecraft server, because fuck Mojang and their inability to give me my account back.
Don't screw them. Otherwise, you'll take it away completely.
Everyone might also notice there's no Wyldkard card today. Card apparently had a hell of a day.
Where'd it go? We can't do this without him. Cut.
But yeah, he's he's not coming today. He's just kind of feeling out his evening, so we're gonna let him rest. We're giving him the night off. But so now you just got us. I apologize, but today we're gonna be talking about video game genres. And before we go into that, we're gonna play a little game. So every game has a genre. It's a really easy way of being able to label that game and let you know generally what kind of a game you're gonna be playing. A lot of games, however, I argue, could have other genres attached to them. So I'm going to name a couple games. We're going to kind of go over what the genre is. And then I'm going to throw out another genre. And you're going to have to argue against me of why it's not that. Why it shouldn't be qualified as that. Mm-hmm. So first game on the chopping block is Portal. So anyone who's ever played Portal knows that it is a puzzle game. It's a platformer game. You use the portal gun to create physics loopholes and allow you to solve all these puzzles. There's even like a little adventure to it, especially once you get later in the game and start traversing the actual warehouse and lab instead of just the various testing rooms. I'm going to argue, however, that you could also call Portal an FPS.
Which I think is stupid.
Because Portal it's a first-person game. You use a gun. You even later in the game use that gun to kill enemies. Not necessarily directly, but you use it to overcome these enemies by causing them to kill each other or themselves or just point them at a wall. So if the adventuring aspect, if even the action aspect, once you get to like the GLaDOS fight, the fact that you have a gun and you shoot, the fact that you are in a first-person view, I argue that all that should qualify it as an FPS. So why shouldn't it? What do you got for me? Tell me why I'm wrong.
I think because you don't use it mostly as a weapon. You use it mostly for puzzle solving. And most of the game is just puzzle solving. Sorry, I'm gonna have a hard time with S's. I'm really bad with that. I have a lisp, and I even like had like some correction when I was younger for the lisp, but I still have it come out every once in a while. But anyways, I still think that because you use it more for a puzzle, and because the game is mostly a puzzle game, that it does not count as an FPS, because an FPS is usually like in a 3D maze type of area where you're going through, you have to maybe kill a certain amount of enemies and then eventually a boss and then move on to the next area. I don't think that it really fits in that kind of thing. I think of games like Doom and like Wolfenstein as FPS, not this.
Well, actually, I actually consider it a first-person shooter puzzle platformer, which is a weird combination. And my reason why is that, there's another game that I like, which is a first-person shooter, but it doesn't have to be, and it's Dishonored, which you can go through that entire game and never kill or harm anybody. And it does have puzzle aspects to it. I mean, it's not like Portal. It's completely different. It actually is a first-person shooter because the guns are intended to be shot at enemies. But you don't have to. And I kind of see Portal in that same way, because just because you have a gun and you can shoot it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be shot at enemies. And having a puzzle aspect is perfectly fine in an FPS as long as it's done correctly.
So what you're saying...
I don't even know if Dishonored would be considered an FPS. I would consider that more of a role playing.
I thought it was considered FPS.
So
I considered it that.
So what you're saying is that...
Because you don't always use a gun. You use a knife, and you can also use your abilities. I don't know if it's really a FPS still. I really do consider FPS as most of the time you're shooting enemies, and you're going to have a boss.
I guess
and you're going through a maze.
It really depends on what you consider an FPS, because to me, I just consider the first person and the ability to shoot, not necessarily kill, but the ability to shoot is what defines an FPS for me. That's probably not the official definition, but that's my definition.
So what Squeaks is saying is that, and let me get this straight, so what makes an FPS is pretty much the level of violence?
The amount of... Okay, you're using a gun mostly for killing, yes.
But what about with Portal, towards the end of it, once you get to the turrets, and especially once you get to GLaDOS, you are absolutely using the Portal gun to kill these enemies.
But it's most of the game, I'm saying. Most of the game is that you're killing enemies.
So
not that most of the game that you're doing puzzles.
So it's how much of that game is violence via that weapon.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say that, because I think that GoldenEye is an FPS.
Yeah,
I think that, as I said Doom. There are people who even say BioShock is an FPS, and I kind of disagree with that. I still think that that's a role-playing more, because you're not always using a weapon. It depends on how you play the game, but there is a part of the game where you can choose not to use it most of the time. And so because of that, I don't think it's considered an FPS still.
Okay.
I think it can have aspects, but I don't think it can be labeled as an FPS.
I think it really depends on just what your personal definition is, because there's a lot of games I find these days that could fit into a lot of different categories.
That's true.
So to me, I'm not as stringent on FPS. I think if it's a first-person visual and it's consistently first-person, like it's not like first-person for a section, and you have shooting elements whether you use them or not, it's an FPS to me. But for those games where that's like it, there's usually a lot of overlay into role-playing elements as well, like with Dishonored and BioShock. But I would still consider them, in my definition, first-person shooters. They're just a mixed genre game.
Okay, so for Bookworm, you're a little more, if it's got a gun and you shoot said gun, it's an FPS. With Squeaky, you're a little more, if the majority of the game doesn't have you using that gun for violence, then it's not an FPS.
Or labeled. I wouldn't label. You can say aspects of it, but I wouldn't label it.
Now, okay. I would agree to that. I wouldn't label a game a pure FPS unless it was something like Doom, which is a pure FPS. I would say, if I was telling someone, to buy BioShock, I would say it's an FPS style combined with role-playing elements. That's what I would describe it was. But it's kind of a game that goes into both genres for me.
Okay.
But it's not a pure either one of those games.
I can understand that.
Okay.
Moving on.
So I've got another one here for you. So a lot of times with the RTS genre, you are stepping into the role of let's step back for a sec. RTS stands for real-time strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And real-time strategy usually is going to evoke images of StarCraft, Warcraft, Red Alert, Command and Conquer. Any of these games that you take a kind of eye-in-the-sky role over an army that you slowly build as you acquire resources and land, and you are trying to take over an area or complete an objective. And they're typically war games. Mm-hmm. But while you're playing these games, there's typically a story. There is a story going on, whether or not it's good or not is depends on the game. You are typically playing a role. You are usually if you're not a nameless character, or if you are a nameless character, you're at least someone that everyone acknowledges is there as a commander. Or if you're a named character, then your role in the story is this commander of the army. And there's usually a progression system going on. As you progress through this game, you unlock the ability to use more units, more buildings. Often you can apply certain research points, depending on what you want to call it, that make certain things better as you play through the story. So my argument is, why aren't RTS games RPGs? Because you're a character, there's a story, there's a progression system. It sounds to me like it's got the hallmarks of an RPG.
I would agree with that. I think that RTSs have a lot of RPG elements, leveling up, grinding, going over, like, you battle enemies to be able to get a whole bunch of gold, and like getting higher level, interacting with other people, like not just in your own thing, but like with NPCs. Mm-hmm. You go over and you interact with them. You might even end up marrying them in some cases, depending on which one you're playing. But I think that in some degrees, yeah, it's like an RPG.
Okay.
The only real-time strategy game series that I really enjoy is Fire Emblem. So, especially in the later game, not so much in the earlier games, but in the later games, you definitely have a lot more RPG elements, which has actually, I think, saved that series because it's brought a lot of people into it. Yeah, I know a lot of people call it waifu simulator, which it kind of is, but it's enjoyable, and it incorporates the real-time strategy elements in the game with it. That's why I like it, part of the reason. So I think they could be considered, at least, you may not consider them pure RPGs, and I don't think you should, but definitely has RPG elements in it. I mean, some of those games, I'm not a fan of real-time strategy, but I do like StarCraft's story. Like, I really like the story behind StarCraft, even though I don't enjoy that genre of game. So I definitely would say it's got some strong RPG elements, especially with the story category.
Yeah. Okay, let me, because you both seem pretty in favor with my argument. Let me argue against it then and see what you say about this. But it does have progression, a level of progression. It does have a story. It does have characters, and you typically play a character in a role. However, there really isn't. I'm going to argue against Squeaks. There's no real grinding aspect. The only grinding you ever get into is if you fail a mission and have to do it over and over. You're not really grinding for that progression other than beating the level. And there's no level system other than the level that you're currently playing on.
You wouldn't consider Star Wars Knights of the Republic a RTS?
KOTOR? Absolutely not. It's an RPG.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would consider that an RPG as well.
Maybe I'm just not very good with the genres then.
But I will say there is grinding in some of them, and I know that I just said Fire Emblem stole some RPG elements, but there is grinding in Fire Emblem because I've done it.
Yeah, that's true.
You're just playing for levels. So I've done that. Right.
You're right. I got it mixed up. I remember now which games that RTSs is, like Age of Empires and that kind of game.
Yeah.
Those are what I played when I was young.
But I will also admit that Fire Emblem, a series I really like, added the RPG elements as the series went on. So it didn't start, so there was no need to really grind in the beginning, but now when you play, there is grinding. So I think that they made a decision as a company to add those elements in. So yeah, I can kind of see your point there too, where maybe some of the real, like, pure RTSs wouldn't have grinding unless you failed the mission and you had to do it over again. But that's not grinding, that's changing your strategy.
Yeah. And it's really interesting that you're bringing that up. So that's the end of my games, and so now we're gonna get into just talking about genres in general. Genres, I feel, have become very limiting. I feel that when people make a game and they slap a genre onto it, they're trapping themselves into a net, and they can't expand past this net. Otherwise, you start getting into trouble. Number one, because a lot of people have trouble blending elements, and I'm getting a call from someone. Let's go ahead and ignore that. A lot of people tend to have trouble, or a lot of developers seem to have kind of trouble when you start to blend genres. But it's really interesting that you brought up Fire Emblem, because that was actually my example of a good RTS that had RPG elements, or a good RPG that has RTS elements. Because anyone who's played those games, especially, like you said, the more recent ones, it still plays like an RTS, but you experience it like an RPG. You have these characters that you sort of can step into the role of. You're both a commander and that character. You have a level progression, you have equipment, you have strength levels. There's all the elements of an RPG, but you move your soldiers around the battlefield. You can initiate combat, but you don't necessarily control the combat. It's all based on their rock, paper, scissors aspect, and everything is based on your troop movements. And that's one of the really good blendings of RPGs that I think they've done, and it's not something that developers are able to do often.
It's very rare to see blended genres, I agree. In fact, the only time I consistently see them are, and this is because of my definition, FPS elements blended with role-playing elements. It's the only time I see them blended. I think that a lot of developers are very cautious to blend things because I don't know necessarily the full reason, but I think they're just kind of nervous because they don't know how their audience is going to receive it, and they don't know if they can make it work. But the only one that I've ever seen consistently is FPS elements combined with RPG elements. Every other genre, like for Fire Emblem, a real-time strategy combining RPG, is very rare that a company does that, and it also works really well.
Well, can you name an FPS that blends RPG elements really well? Because I can think of one right now. Borderlands.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Borderlands is another one that took two genres, and I like what you were saying about how, I think they're scared of blending them because they're worried about their market. I think you're absolutely right. I think, when you think RPG gamers, you probably think of a very different group of people than your FPS gamers. When I think RPG, I think, these folks who probably are surrounded by anime paraphernalia all around them, and they're just grinding away for 7, 8, 12 hours a day playing these games that are like 100 plus hours. Whereas when I think FPS, I think like a bunch of college bros,
And I also think that, honestly, this is also, like I mentioned, that they're nervous to try, but it's also like, they have to deal with publishers and investors who are going to be like, well, we don't want to give you the money to do something new because we're not sure if it's going to sell.
Yeah.
As much as I have complained, not on this channel, but just to people in real life, that I don't like Call of Duty because it just seems like they're making the same game year and after year after year after year, but it sells. It sells. It really does, because that is what their market wants. So I think you have a hard time, trying to get your investors or your publishers to greenlight something new because they don't want to, take a chance of it failing.
Yeah.
Even though a lot of the times things that are new do pretty well in the gaming industry, but.
Okay. Squeaks, thoughts?
I
concur.
Yeah. I never really was one of the people who really cared about like a name other than like indie. That's the only genre I've ever cared about.
Yeah.
And everything else, I just kind of like, oh, maybe it has some horror elements. Oh, maybe it's an action. Maybe it has RPG. I don't really care as long as it like seems like it's going to be something that has story in it. I never really cared about that. I never really went into it.
That's kind of how I feel. I was never a person who hates a genre, because if the story is there, I'll get it. I mean, there's only a few games where I haven't learned a gameplay system, and one of them is StarCraft, and that's just because I can't get the gameplay system no matter what. No. But I do love the story. But that's very rare. If there's a good story, I'll usually try to suffer through the gameplay, even if it's terrible. StarCraft isn't, but just watching me play is terrible. So.
Okay. Now, what do you think about genres as a negative? Because a lot of times when you slap a genre on something, it's going to come with expectations. And if it doesn't meet those expectations, have they failed the genre, or was that on you for expecting something that they chose not to include? So, for instance, let's look at Mass Effect. Now, I love Mass Effect 2. I actually can't. I've never played 3 because of all the negativity, and I can't stand 1. I've tried to play 1 3 times, and I can't get through it. I loved 2 because I thought it was a really cool blend of FPS and RPG. There were definitely a lot of FPS elements that weren't present. It wasn't, number one, it was third person.
Yeah.
It wasn't as kind of hectic, just bullet hell that you would imagine, because there was still a lot of pause battle. You use that power, you use that power, I'll use this power, and that's where your RPG elements came into, and I loved that blend. I've got a buddy who despises it. He thought that there was way too much FPS in Mass Effect 2, that they should have stuck with their RPG roots. Mass Effect 3 is just an absolute abomination to him. He refused, and he's already dismissed Andromeda, and Andromeda hasn't even come out.
So, is that like a hate on genres, or is that a hate on a series changing?
It's definitely for that specific instance. That's a series being changed by a genre shift. But
because I can understand that, because that happened with Resident Evil.
That's a very good example. So with Resident Evil, what changed?
It went from horror to thriller.
Would you argue that it went from survival horror to action horror?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Action, not horror, even thriller.
Just action?
But I don't think it's scary in 4. Scary? It just has like some weird moments.
They went. See, I actually do like 4. I've got the remake. I gotta replay it again because I haven't played it since it came out many years ago. But I liked 4, but 4 was a turning point as well, because it was horror elements, but it was also a character who was capable of defending themselves. So it lost that helplessness that 1, 2, and 3 had. And then while it worked in 4, and it did a lot to, kind of change the genre, 5 and 6, it was so much action that it just hurt the horror element. And I can understand people hating it for changing genres to the point where it became more action, less horror. Yeah. But I do think this hinders games too, because just having a genre change doesn't mean it's going to be bad. Like, a good example is the Mario series. Now, the Mario series is at its core a platformer, but they have games that are RPG. You have Paper Mario. You actually have Super Mario RPG. Those are great games.
Arguably one of the best RPGs ever made.
Exactly. Those are great games, and the genre changed. And I feel like people who are like, oh, I don't want to play that because it's not the genre it's supposed to be, or I hate RPGs. I mean, you're losing out because you're judging a Mario game based on what it normally is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And Zelda's... sorry.
No, you can go.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, Zelda's been like that too, because it used to be side-scrolling and now it's 3D.
Yeah.
I mean, it's constantly changing. Many people say, oh no, the NES ones are the best games, and then some people are like, no, I prefer the original 3D ones.
That wasn't really a genre shift though. That was a graphical change.
It also changed the genre pretty much.
You think so?
Pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah.
because you didn't play the game the same way.
There is a lot of arguments I've seen about people who are like 3D Zelda games versus 2D Zelda games, and it's like it's not a genre change, but it kind of is because it's like the 2D games to 3D games, which is its 2D games are its own genre now because we have 3D. So it is kind of a thing. There's like an actual like debate about what is better, and I think they're both great. So I'm just like, you guys are crazy, but yeah, I can see that. I also think that the opposite is true though. People get so hyped up on what they think a genre should be that it ruins game experiences for them. Like new platformers come out nowadays, and I know that the platforming it hasn't died. People are like platforming genres have died, but it has diminished since the early 2000s, late 90s. But people anytime a new platformer comes out, they always compare it to, oh, this isn't like Banjo-Kazooie, or this isn't like the Super Mario 64, and I'm like, but is it a good
Wait
platformer?
till Ukulele comes out.
Oh, I know. But it's like, I'm also like, but why are you comparing it to something that not only do you have a nostalgia bias to, is it still a good platformer? It doesn't have to be like those other games to still be a decent platformer. So I think both situations actually hurt, people's introspection on certain games.
So, Sean or Kuma, what do you think Owlboy is?
I would call Owlboy oh man, because there's three different things I would call it. I would call it a RPG adventure platformer.
I would call it a platform side-scrolling adventure.
Okay.
Because it has elements of Zelda in it, but you have that whole like really layered thing because you're flying around. So right. I feel it's more of a platform because it's important that you're going from platform to solve puzzles.
Correct.
But I feel like it's still side-scrolling because you have to go to a certain window to be able to do certain things and to talk to certain people, like exploring. So it's even almost like a little bit open world too, kind of in some aspects, even though it does have a cutoff, but you can be able to go all the way over here, even though you're supposed to be all the way down here at this time, and it won't like say, oh, go over there.
That's an interesting argument, and I don't want to talk too much about this because I know the reason I got inspired to do an episode on genres is for a project, a video that Wyldkard is working on. But it's interesting you mention open world and side-scrolling in the same sentence, because Metroidvania style games are some people consider them open world games, and some people consider the style of map that you get in a Metroidvania game, where it's a bunch of rooms that are all just interconnected on a map. And while all the rooms are connected in one big world, you're only going through room by room. Whereas with an open world game, it is an open world with smaller sort of like sub instances.
Mm-hmm. It's difficult. It's like more you can explore. Exploration, maybe a little bit better word than open.
I actually when we were having this conversation, I Googled because I think he asked Card asked, are there any 3D Metroidvania titles? And I was like, I honestly don't know the answer. Mm-hmm. So I actually Googled, and I found more debate than I ever wanted to see between video game nerds because, oh my god. So there's no consensus on that either.
No.
But yeah, there's definitely an argument there.
So should a game be beholden to a genre, or should it be allowed to expand and add to it?
Expand, because that's how Nintendo is still alive today.
Yeah,
because it keeps on changing.
You can have a game series that is at its pure what people enjoy, but I think you need to try something new, blend stuff in, because the market does get stale. It really does. I mean, as much as I make fun of Call of Duty and they don't make it that many changes, they do usually change something from game to game. Because if you just keep repeating the same shooting out the same game year after year, people do get tired of it. You start to lose people in your market.
It's worked for the Tales series.
Yeah. I can give an example. With Mario Party, what ended up happening with the first 3 games is that people were complaining that they're too similar.
Mm-hmm.
And so in 4, they radically changed it up. And then what did people do? They said, it's not like the originals.
Yeah, that happens too.
Would you argue that there
they
was actually
made
there was
more
enough
sales.
time? There was enough time between 3 and
Yeah.
4 that that 1, 2, and 3 became classics, and then by the time they came out with 4, that now people are like, whoa, 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 these aren't the classics that we've learned to love. And then Nintendo's like, you fuckers were complaining about this a couple years ago. What the hell?
Yeah.
That has to do with nostalgia blindness, which I honestly think that could be a whole topic in itself. I think we have done it before.
Probably.
But
I have it.
But
I can admit it.
But, I think people have these nostalgia blinders, and that does come into play when people are blending because, I still see people who are like, for another example that's from Nintendo, Super Smash Brothers, that community, trying to debate which game is better is a freaking firestorm.
But it's impossible as well.
It's impossible. But there's people who are like, Melee is the best. It's better than, Brawl, and it's better than Super Smash Bros. 4. And I have to look at them and be like, I played Melee. I love Melee. Don't get me wrong. But there's a lot of things that, because of the technology at the time, just aren't there. So, are you using your nostalgia blinders, or are you actually making an argument? Because they all seem pretty damn good to me, but there's definitely some flaws with each one. So I think nostalgia blinders come really into play when it comes to genres, because when you try something new, the majority might actually like it and it might sell better, but you're going to have people who always complain that, oh my god, they changed too much.
Okay.
Back in my day.
Yeah. But really, in order to evolve with the market, they need to blend. They need to make, improvements and innovations, because they're not going to be able to keep up with the market if they don't.
So, what would you rather see going forward in gaming? Do you want to see more genre blending, or just redefining of existing genres? So doing more with a specific genre, but still technically staying within its bounds, or more blending of different kinds of games? We've seen the RPG FPS with Borderlands done really well. We've seen the RTS RPG with Fire Emblem. What kind of blendings would you want to see, and what do you think is going to be better as games grow?
I think that I would like to see more blending, but I also just would like to see, in general, more redefining, features of the genres. Like, I mentioned platformers. Platformers were super popular. Every game was a platformer back in the 90s, early 2000s.
Because Mario and Sonic were big.
Yep. And then it went away. And I don't think genres should ever die, but I do want to see them redefined. I want to see them blended. But what I don't want is for a genre to become so popular that the game market becomes saturated because people are afraid to try new ideas. And that's one thing I will give indie developers. Indie developers have brought back genres that were previously fairly dead.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like Owlboy.
They have the freedom to experiment. Right now you have with FPSs, there's so many different FPSs out. Every FPS has to have a multiplayer. It used to be, every FPS had to have a single-player game. Now we're starting to see games that are coming out that just drop single-player altogether. Look at Battlefront. There was a huge debacle when that game came out because it didn't have a single-player. All right, so Squeaks, what do you think? Do you want to see a blending, or do you want to see a better just, growing of the individual genres first?
I say all of the above. I think that everything is important in video games. If you just had one type of way of making a video game, it'd be boring. I think that you need blending, and I think that you need to go back to your roots and pull out what was the best of games and bring out that nostalgia factor. But I also think that you should take a genre and try to make it the best that you can. So I think that's all important.
And I think it's really good for established series. I love the Assassin's Creed series, but I will admit it's lost its way and it's gone way off the tracks. But what I did like about last year is they said, we're not going to release a game this year. We're going to redefine the series, go back to the drawing board, and figure out what we need to do to make this the game series everybody enjoyed. And that's what you need to do when you realize that you've become stagnant. And they can bring it back with, you know, RPG elements, rework their story, but I hope they come and do a blend so it's new but also enjoyable. And I want to see more game developers doing that, because there's a lot of games series that I think have gotten really stale.
You know what I
think? I enjoy them.
You know what I think would make a really good Assassin's Creed game? Just take Dishonored and just put an Assassin's Creed coat of paint on it.
Yeah, I mean you could. I mean that I love
Make
Dishonored.
it first person.
It's about an assassin, so it would actually work real well. But
add an actual good story to it.
Yeah,
It hasn't had a good story since 2. I'm sorry.
No, it really hasn't, and it just, like I said, that's a whole another reason which we could do a whole GamerKulture episode about games producing year after year instead of allowing years for story development, which is a whole completely other issue. But just in general, I think when game developers realize, hey, this genre is becoming static, let's try something new, and then listen to what your community thinks, because there's always going to be a few really loud people who are like, this sucks because it's new. Mm-hmm. But the majority of your audience isn't going to be like that. It's either going to be, all of them are like, oh no, this was really bad, or, oh no, we really liked this, do more of this. But, you know, keep the roots good. I mean, always keep your roots. Don't give that up.
Okay. I think a good example of what I was trying to say is that Mario has been doing very well at keeping to its roots, but also expanding. Mm-hmm. On the DS, they've been releasing regular platform games, like the Mario 3D World. It really reminds me of the original Mario games, of you going around and having to collect stuff and everything. Even though it is from a 3D perspective, it's still a platformer.
Yeah.
And then you have this new game, the Odyssey game, which reminds me so much of Super Mario Sunshine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm excited for that too. I like both of them. I think that they're both really good games.
And then you have Zelda, which looks like, it's like with Breath of the Wild, it looks like they've developed a very true open world. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could set fires now and jump. You can jump.
You can jump? What is this, witchcraft?
Jump on a wall.
I know. So it looks like, I will say, out of all of the big game developing companies, Nintendo does a pretty good job of blending when they do it, or with changing their genre.
Which is funny, because they do, like you were saying, they do a really good job with Mario. Mario's done a lot of really different kinds of games, but still kind of keeps that core Mario feel, and it's still a Mario game. Even when they do like the sports games or kart games or RPGs or whatever, it's still Mario. Sonic is like the opposite side of that coin. Every time they try to do anything with Sonic, it's garbage. And this is coming from someone who enjoyed Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic Heroes. I enjoyed both those games.
Fun.
I recognize that they weren't great.
Especially
Shadow the Hedgehog.
Sonic needs to go back to the drawing board and find out what they want it to be. And it looks like they might have done it. I'm crossing my fingers. But they also do 2 steps forward, and then they just crash the series every few years, like Sonic 2006. Sonic Boom are terrible games. They're terrible, and they're broken as hell.
It's funny. There's actually a lyric in the Shadow the Hedgehog theme song. It's 1 step forward, 2 steps back now. I'm like, oh my god, they were talking about the franchise.
Foreshadowing.
This is 1 step forward, 2 steps back.
Yeah, and then like we were mentioning, Nintendo's really good at this. Another good example, which we haven't really talked about, is the Metroid series. Now, we're going to get rid of Other M. That never happened. But when they went from 2D to 3D, it became a first-person shooter, but it still felt like a Metroidvania. At least from what I read, that was everyone's argument for a 3D Metroidvania.
3D Metroidvania, yeah, because you're still doing the same thing. You're going around, you're doing stuff, you're fighting the enemies. It's still the same thing. It's just from a different perspective.
Yeah, well, again, it was a really good blend.
we know from our chat that Card's got some good points, and if he's been reading the same stuff that we have, then like you're saying, Book, there's a lot of arguments out there, and a lot of good arguments for both sides too. It's not just a flame war. It's wow, it really is this. Oh, but it can also be this. It's like it literally just falls in which side do you want to back, because both of them are right.
There are flame wars in the video game community, but there's also a lot of people who have really good discussion. You just
sometimes
have to
we sit down to tea and we discuss it by the fireplace.
And then sometimes we're screaming at each other like loud frat boys on... I don't know. I don't know where that metaphor was going. But yeah, it's just like... It's very interesting, some of the debates I found for this, because in between the people who are obviously either trolling or just so terrible at what they were trying to say... who were just like, oh my god, Metroidvanias are 2D. If you think they're 3D, you're stupid. There's actually was legitimate discussion about, how is this considered a Metroidvania? Why would you consider this a Metroidvania? Can Metroidvanias be 3D? Yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot of people who actually do decent discussion in the video game world. You just gotta find them because, like I said, the ones who are loud are also the ones who are usually really annoying, unfortunately.
All right, so we're starting to get a little long, so we're actually going to end on a question today, and hopefully it's not too difficult to think about, and if you want, I'll go first, but it's going to be, what is your favorite genre, and why? What caused it to be your favorite genre?
I won't cheat and say indie, because that's kind of, like, petty.
I'm also going to argue that indie indie isn't a genre, I'm going to argue.
It's a category to search on, so it's kind of difficult. It's kind of difficult for me to say whether or not it's a genre.
It's a category, but I'm gonna say it's not a genre because
if you say an FPS, I know what that is. If you say a platformer, I know what that is. If you say what indie is, it's like, okay.
Yeah. So I won't cheat. I won't cheat.
Okay, I'll start with mine. And my favorite genre. Sorry, I just burped stomach acid laced with sriracha.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thanks. You're welcome. You're welcome. It hurts. I'm in pain right now.
I'm sure it feels like
I became a dragon for half a second. It sucks.
Yeah.
So my favorite is RPGs. I love RPGs. And I can tell you why. It's because the first games I owned were RPGs. Not the first games I played, but because being at buddies' houses, it'd be fighter games, or one friend had Diablo, which I had no idea what I was doing, so I couldn't really enjoy myself. But the first game I personally ever owned was Pokemon. So I kind of got into that habit of grinding, learning how to grind and learning how to love the grind. First console game I ever owned was Orphan the Scion of Sorcery, which was a JRPG based on an anime. And then the game right after that was Kingdom Hearts. Mm-hmm. So the first 3 games that I owned to my name were Pokemon Blue version, and then I didn't own a video game until PlayStation. I got a PlayStation 2 in 6th grade in 2012, and got Orphan and then Kingdom Hearts. And those the RPG genre is just something that I've just pretty much grown up with now. My gaming experiences were initially flavored by RPGs, to the point that if I sat down to fighters, or if I sat down to any other game, I wasn't good at it, because those weren't the games I wanted to buy. Those weren't the games I played when I was at home. So the one exception to that being Soul Calibur 2 and Naruto Ultimate Ninja 2. Me and my brother played the shit out of those. 2 is
the best.
What?
I played the crap out of that game, Soul Calibur 2.
Loved Soul Calibur 2.
And I will make you hate me forever for the character I always chose.
Taki? Talon.
Talon.
You hate Talon playing motherfucker.
You will hate me.
One of my best buddies.
Blades.
One of my best buddies at the time would come over, and he was the only other friend that would come over and play with me, and he played Talon, and he knew how to do her Hurricane combo, which was her 3 best combos strung together.
Yep.
So it's like, da-da-da-da, knock you on the floor, stab, 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 kick you up, air. It's like, I play Nightmare.
You're done. You're done.
I had to learn how to like do combo breaks and things like that because of him. I'm like, you're forcing me to get good. I hate you.
Get good.
So yeah, RPGs for me because I've grown up on them.
So my journey into gaming became really young, but the game I started out with was not my favorite genre. So the very first game I owned, not beat, but owned, was Little Mermaid for Game Boy, and it was like the non-color games too.
Yeah,
like, that's how old it was.
Old school.
Oh god, old school. So Little Mermaid and Lion King for Game Boy, and then I got Pokemon, and that was pretty much Game Boy centric for a while. And then I got my first console was a Super Nintendo, and it was also the Lion King game for Super Nintendo, which is why when Squeaky was playing, I was giving her some tips. I was like, I remember these things.
I know your pain, sister.
I know your pain. So that was it. And then I got Legend of Zelda at a friend's house. It was the N64 version. It was Ocarina of Time, and we beat that game as like friends, as a buddy team. But it wasn't until much later. I had more games from that, but those are just the three, like the ones that I remember the most. But my first console I got besides the Super Nintendo was a PlayStation 2. Yeah, I completely skipped 64, which is surprising because I played a lot of games, but that's beside the point.
I didn't own a 64 until I was 16.
Yeah. And my first game, and it actually got me to like this genre as a whole, was also Kingdom Hearts. And that made me investigate RPGs because I had never played one before. And that's a hack and slash RPG, but the Final Fantasy characters, I was like, where are these characters from? And then I went into Final Fantasy hell, and now I am in RPG hell consistently. But I think that I like RPGs because they're time-consuming games. And when I was younger, I'm by no means rich now, but I'm in a much better financial position than I was when I was a kid. And RPGs were so long that I could keep playing them until I had enough money to afford a new game.
Yes.
Which was really important for me as a kid. And also the story element. I loved the story elements. It was something that I didn't see with a lot of platformers, and I've always been an avid reader and avid writer, still am, and I need the story. I can't just play it for the gameplay. It's why I struggle with fighting games, even though I know fighting games have a lot of story to them, so I don't need any comments trying to educate me about that. But it's just like, story-driven games were the thing, and back in the day, it was really RPGs that had it. Now you have a lot more blending, and there's a lot more story in other genres, but let's be real, most of the platformers that were cornering the market back in the day had really small story, and it was all gameplay.
Yep.
So that was why I really done RPGs. It was because they took forever, and I could play it until I had money for a new game and story.
Kingdom Hearts 2 I got a high score, yeah, Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, I got a high score in all the mini-games. Mm-hmm. Which means Port Royal Skateboarding Challenge in Kingdom Hearts 2. And exactly like you said, like, when, you grow up in a household where you only get 1 or 2 games a year, mm-hmm. you have to make do. Yeah. I remember I got Ace Combat 5? I think it was Ace Combat 5. And I would, like, roleplay stories in my head while playing the missions. Because I'm just like, because that's where the fun is now. Because I've beaten this game every difficulty with every plane.
And when you're a little kid, I mean, for the most part, you can buy pretty much any game you want because they were so hard, and there was no internet for cheating that it took you till the next game to beat the damn thing if you could beat it. But when you're older, like a teenager or someone who's 10 years old, you do know how to beat the games, and you can't just buy a platformer and be like, you beat it in like 4 days, maybe a week, and then you're like, well, I'm stuck until birthday.
Yeah. Okay, Squeaks?
I'm going to kind of like stretch it here. It's mostly interactive stories that I like.
Okay.
And it kind of goes into many different areas because you could say Walking Dead is an interactive story, mm-hmm. even though it is also a choose-your-own adventure.
I'd say an interactive story and choose-your-own adventure are the same thing. Mm-hmm. I'd argue that.
Yeah, I like, what is that one? Life is Strange.
Yeah, yep.
And then the game I just played on my YouTube channel, To the Moon. which was made with RPG Maker. That's a very beautiful one.
I've never played To the Moon, but I actually know the story behind it, and it's a game I want to play because of it. But my God, that's a really deep story.
You should.
So,
yeah. Stanley Parable is also one of my favorites.
I have to play that one too. I've never played it, and every time I mention this, they're like, "You haven't played Stanley Parable?" And I was like, "I didn't know it existed until like 2 years ago."
God, was it Film Theory that? God, I want to say it was either Film Theory or Game Theory. Someone just made a video where the guy who voices the narrator for Stanley Parable narrated the video.
Oh, I gotta find it. I gotta find it. I love I just, like, the narrator sold that game. Every time I watch a video, it's like, Stanley went to the right. Nope, Stanley went to the left. Stanley went to the left before he realized that the only way forward was to the right. It's just awesome.
It was great.
So yeah.
I mean, I do like games where you can actually play a game. Like, it seems so petty. It's like I'm playing a story. Like, I'm just watching a movie or something when I talk about interactive story. Because people are saying, you're not a real gamer there.
You're interacting with the game and you're affecting the story. I'd say you're playing a game.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's better than those visual novels, those, like, ecchi anime visual novels on
you're just clicking next.
On Steam.
Next.
That's not a game, it's a book.
That have no story at all, and they're just simply for waifu bait, and you're just like, oh, come on. I play a game that's kind of Japanese anime, but it actually has puzzle elements in it, and it's a very underrated series on Nintendo 3DS, Nintendo DS, and it's 999 in that series, which is I can't think of the actual name of the series, but it's it's really mature for a Nintendo DS game, first of all, because it's basically Saw with puzzle elements.
Oh.
Yeah, like, I would look it up. It's very, very weird, but it is a visual novel. But because it has puzzle elements, you actually control... And characters can die, and there's multiple endings. Yeah. But
9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors?
Yep, that's the first game in the series. It's completely fucked up, too. I was playing this game, and I was like, why does this have a mature rating? Nintendo doesn't give mature ratings, and then within, like, the first 5 minutes, someone blows up and dies. I'm like, oh! That's why.
The series is called Zero Escape.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an escape the room game, but it's really well done with a visual.
I like escape the room games.
Yeah. That's what it is. I couldn't think of the title, the genre, but it's a escape the room game with visual novel elements. But it's done pretty well, especially for something that I don't associate with mature games. But it's a very bizarre game.
Was it pixelated?
Sense. Yeah.
Yes, this is my game. I'm gonna play it.
Oh no, wait, no, it's not pixelated. It's not pixelated. It's anime style.
Broke her heart.
Oh, okay, I'll go with that. Pixelated open or escape the room games are so good. I love those so much. Yeah. That's like my number 2 if you want me to give a number 2.
Yeah, and investigate the game a little more, but it's a series I've actually enjoyed. I haven't played the second and third installments, but I did play the first one and I was like, I'm really impressed with Nintendo. This is a mature game. That's not from Japan. That's not porn.
So we're coming up on an hour. So any final thoughts on genre in games? Are they limiting? Are they freeing? Do you want to see more blending? Do you want to see more growth in the individual genres first? Squeaky.
A name is just a name.
A rose by any other name.
A name is just. Yep. I mean, it doesn't matter. The name is just a name. Check out the games before you actually decide what you like, because I like a broad spectrum of games, because all the games I just mentioned also can be labeled as different genres. It's just condensed so that y'all can be able to know what I basically like.
Okay, Bookworm.
I think a person shouldn't limit themselves to one genre, and I think that's on them if they do. Like, you can specialize and enjoy a game genre. Like I said, I enjoy RPGs, but I don't just play RPGs. I play other stuff. A lot of the games I've mentioned have been different genres that aren't RPGs. But I also think that its developers need to not let the market get stale. We don't need another, 10-year period where it's all platformers. Like, no, diversity is a good thing. Mm-hmm. Use it. So, but I think that's up to the developers in that case, but also up to players to, don't settle in just one genre because you enjoy it, because you don't know if you would enjoy something else if you don't go and experience it.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And I'm gonna weigh in as well. I want to see more blending of genres. I want to see what disparate genres can do. I want to see more like amnesia puzzle horror games. I want to see more FPS RPGs. I want to see more action adventure. I don't know, RTSs. Stuff like that. Like Natural Selection 2, where it's an RTS for one person and an FPS for everyone else. Like stuff like that. I want to see more blending of everything. And I think as we blend more, we're going to see a lot more creativity and a lot more diversity in the pool. So that was today's discussion on genres. I hope everyone liked it. Thank you very much for tuning in. For all your gamer culture needs, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch TV, GrandGeekGathering.com. Shows been brought to you by the Grand Geek Gathering Network. I can say this, I trip over my tongue. That's okay, I'll get through it, I promise. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us, and a special thanks to the band Carbonine for granting us permission for their use of the song Say I Am, unless we use the other song for the opening today, in which case thank you to the band Alex and Alex for their use of the song Glam Jam. Join the gathering, stay cultured, have a great week, and GGG! That gets less and less enthusiastic every week.
We're some of us are very stressed this week, so that's
fair point.